new and what we're reading, a half-year check-in. Now, since last month, we talked about our favorite books of the year. I only had a very short window to put in what I liked. So I'm going to get started. I'll tell you the few books that I did enjoy. So these are my favorite books so far. Okay? So I'm going to start with the first one, All the Broken Places by John Boyne. Now, if you read The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which I did not, he takes a character from that book and he uses her as the character in this book, Gretel. Now, Gretel, when we meet her, she's a widow. She's comfortable. She's 90 years old, lives in London, and she is living her life best she can. She's still very astute, but she has a shameful secret that she does not want anyone to know. And there's very few people who do know it. She was the daughter of a Nazi prison commandant, and her father was hanged as a war criminal, and she and her mother escaped, and she's never felt any repercussions. So it's a very interesting look at a person with a lot of guilt. Okay, next is a more lighthearted book, The Fake by Zoe Whittall. This is a book about two people who are drawn together by their fascination with Tammy, who is a very charismatic, compulsive liar. And she beguiles both of them. She's playing one against the other. And somehow they get together and they try to figure out what kind of person she is and what kind of lies they've been told.
Sit down and I'll put it on louder.
No.
I'm sorry? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so it's a very short book. It's fun. It's light. And if you're looking for just a little quick, fast read about a very fascinating personality, I would recommend this one. Next, we have The Postcard by Anne Berest. This is sort of a counterpoint to All the Broken Places. This is an astonishing novel. It's based on the author's own family and her search to find out the truth about her family who perished in the Holocaust. And this was a bestseller in France, and this book is just astonishing. She has a postcard with 4 names written on it, and from that, she goes on a quest to find out what happened to her family. It is written as a novel instead of a memoir of family history, I think because she had to imagine all these conversations, and she didn't want to pretend she was actually there. But I love this book. It's a very rich and moving book. Okay, next is a very old book. In fact, it's celebrating its 65-year-old birthday this year. This is The Best of Everything by Rona Jaffe. It's a reissue of the novel. It's a bestseller. It was written by 24-year-old Rona Jaffe. And I only knew it because of the stupid movie that I saw. And this is actually has a lot of early stirrings of feminism and about women who were working, young women who were working in great numbers for the first time, and why they were working and what they wanted. Did they want a marriage? Did they want a career? Could they have both? And I just thought that this was a very well done book, and the characters were much more complex than the soap opera kind of movie. It was with Hope Lang and Stephen Boyd, and I would recommend reading it because it's an interesting look at 1950s women's lives as working women. All right, finally, I have The Lockup by John Bandel. He's an Irish author, and he's written a long-running series under the name of Benjamin Black. But the last few books he's written under his own name, John Bandel. They're very literary mysteries. They're mysteries, but there's something deeper in them. It's not just like an Agatha Christie.
Have you ever read them, Stuart?
I can't hear that well.
Oh, I think I'm going to ask everyone to mute right now. Just mute yourself. Okay. All right. Next, we're going away from my picks to sneak peek at books that are coming out. Now, I have to say this was a very difficult task. There's so much stuff coming out, and I really had to winnow it down to a precious few. So first, we're going to look at general fiction. All right. So we have first up is The Fraud by Zadie Smith. It's coming out September 5th. This is based on real historical events. It takes place in 1873 Victorian London, and the city's mesmerized by the Tichborne trial, wherein a lower-class butcher from Australia claims he is the rightful heir of a sizable estate and title. Mrs. Eliza Touchette becomes determined to find out if he's really who he says he is or if he's a fraud. So, kind of interesting premise. Next, we have Paulette Giles' Chainville, a novel of murder, loss, and vengeance. If anyone is familiar with her, she wrote The Newsreader, which also takes place in the 19th century out west. This one's coming out September 12th. After recovering from a traumatic head injury, former Union soldier John Chainville discovers his beloved sister and her family were murdered during the end of the Civil War and embarks on an odyssey across the Reconstruction-era South, seeking revenge. So it's a very interesting time period, so looking forward to that. Next, we have The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff, street date September 12th. Her last book was The Matrix, which took place during the medieval time. This one is, the premise is a servant girl escapes from a colonial settlement in the wilderness. She carries nothing with her but her wits, few possessions, and the spark of God that burns hot within her. What she finds in this strange new land is beyond the limits of her imagination and will bend her belief in everything that her own civilization had taught her. So it seems like we're going to see the native people and the white civilization come into contact with each other. All right. Next is The Enemy Beside Me by Naomi Reagan, and that's coming out September 12th. She's a pretty popular author at New City Library. So this is her newest one. It says, invited to speak at a Holocaust conference in Lithuania, Milia Gottstein, the head of an organization whose purpose is to bring Nazi war criminals to justice, is drawn to Dr. Darius Vitus, but hostile forces push them to make choices that will betray all they've worked for and what has grown between them. So it sounds like just a little touch of romance there. Next, The Leftover Woman by Jean Kwok, which will be out October 10th. She wrote Girl in Translation, one of my favorite books. This is an interesting, really interesting idea. Fleeing a controlling husband and searching for the daughter taken from her at birth, Jasmine Yang arrives in New York City from a small village in China. Meanwhile, publishing executive Rebecca Whitney, whose contented life includes a newly adopted Chinese daughter, suddenly faces an industry scandal. Their paths will cross thunderously. And most people are aware of the one-child policy that was in effect in China for many years, and they exported their little girls because people, if they only had a chance to have one child, they wanted it to be a boy. Well, of course, it's caused some problems because the boys in China are having a dearth of women to choose from now. But this is interesting to see it from the point of view of a Chinese woman whose daughter was taken. Okay. A Very Inconvenient Scandal by Jacqueline Mitchard, street date November 14th. A page-turning family drama that explores the emotional consequences of loyalty, deception, and jealousy. Done by her recently widowed father's reckless behavior. He impregnated her best friend. A young woman must learn to navigate a new world where the people she should trust the most have become strangers she cannot trust at all. Okay. We've got more general fiction. Absolution by Alice McDermott, coming out November 7th. Trisha is a shy newlywed married to a rising attorney on loan to Navy intelligence. Darlene is a practiced corporate spouse and mother of three, a beauty and a bully. In Saigon in 1963, the two women form a wary alliance as they balance the era's mandate to be helpmates to their ambitious husbands with their own developing impulse to do good for the people of Vietnam. It sort of reminded me of Coming Home, the movie with Jane Fonda, where the women who were kind of left behind were just supposed to be good little housewives. So this sounds like Alice McDermott, writes great books. Okay, next we have So Late in the Day, Stories of Women and Men by Claire Keegan, who Brian and I really like this author a lot. street date for this is November 14th. It's three powerful and exquisite stories, newly revised and expanded by the Irish author who is considered among the form's most masterful practitioners. By the way, one of the stories in there is called Antarctica, and we do have that short story book here. And that Antarctica was one of the stories that really haunted me. It reminded me of the powerful impact a short story can have, not unlike The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. So her short stories are just very powerful. Don't miss this one. Okay, next is Day, a novel by Michael Cunningham. He wrote The Hours. This is coming out November 14th. This post-COVID novel will resonate with all of us who struggle during a pandemic. As the world changes around them, a Brooklyn family weathers the storms of growing up, growing older, falling in and out of love, losing the things that are most precious, and learning to go on. On the bottom here, we have The Little Liar by Mitch Albom, who wrote Tuesdays with Morrie. This is coming out November 14th. In The Little Liar, his first novel set during the Holocaust, Mitch Albom interweaves the story of Nico, his brother Sebastian, and their schoolmate Fanny, who miraculously survived the death camps and spend years searching for Nico, who has become a pathological liar, by the way, and the Nazi officer who radically changed their lives. As the decades pass, Albom reveals the consequences of what they said, did, and endured. Okay. Now we have one of Brian's favorite authors, a Brooklyn crime novel by Jonathan Lethem, coming out October 3rd. A sweeping story of community crime and gentrification facing more than 50 years of life in one Brooklyn neighborhood. A blistering book, a love story, social commentary, history, protest novel, and mystery joins the whole thing together. Is the crime time or the almighty dollar? And we have The Museum of Failures by Thridi Amrigar, coming out September 26th. It's also one of my favorite authors. She wrote Honor, which came out last year. Returning to Bombay to adopt a baby and see his elderly mother, Remy Wadia, stumbling upon a photograph that reveals shocking family secrets, reevaluates his entire childhood, his relationship to his parents, and his heart's judgment on the decisions and events long hidden from him. So I would say all of these novels are all character driven. You're not going to see a lot of thrilling car chases, or it's just more thoughtful, character driven books. Okay, next we have A House for Alice by Diana Evans. Street date September 12th. At the novel's center is Alice herself, the Pitt matriarch who, after 50 years in England, now longs to live out her final years in her homeland of Nigeria. Her three daughters are torn on the issue of whether she stays or goes, and while youngest sibling Melissa also grapples with the embers of her own failed relationship, the Pitt family's foundational pillars of trust, love, and cultural identity begin to crack. And I guess it asks that age-old question, can you go home again? Night Watch by Jane Ann Phillips, coming out on September 19th. It's also historical. In 1874, in the wake of the Civil War, 12-year-old Connolly and her mother Eliza, who hasn't spoken in more than a year, seek refuge in a West Virginia mental asylum where they get swept up in the life of the facility and the mystery behind the man they call the Night Watch. Epic, enthralling, and meticulously crafted, Night Watch is a brilliant portrait of family endurance against all odds and a stunning chronicle of surviving war and its aftermath. All right. America Fantastica by Tim O'Brien, coming out October 24th. This is from the author of The Things They Carried. Delivers his first new novel in 2 decades. A brilliant and rollicking odyssey in which a bank robbery by a disgraced journalist sparks a cross-country chase through a nation corroded by shameless delusion and deceit. Evil Eye by Etaf Room, coming out September 5th. The acclaimed New York Times bestselling author of A Woman is No Man returns with a striking exploration of the expectations of Palestinian-American women, the meaning of a fulfilling life, and the ways our unresolved past affect our present. Okay. Frozen River by Ariel Lawhone. That's coming out December 5th. This is a gripping historical mystery inspired by the life and diary of Martha Ballard, a renowned 18th century midwife who investigates a shocking murder that unhinges her small community. The Frozen River is a thrilling, tense, and tender story of a remarkable woman who had the courage to take a stand and in the process wrote herself into American history. And here we have fan favorite Ken Follett, The Armor of Light. This is the long-awaited sequel. It's coming out on September 26th. It's a sequel to A Column of Fire. The Armor of Light heralds a new dawn for Kingsbridge, England, where progress clashes with tradition, class struggles pushed into every part of society, and war in Europe engulfs the entire continent and beyond. Now we get into the realm of thrillers. Okay, and if you look at these authors, I know you are familiar with all of them because they're very well-established authors. First up is John Grisham, The Exchange, After the Firm, coming out October 17th. And if you read The Firm many years ago, this is the sequel. What became of Mitch and Abby McGear after they exposed the crimes of Memphis law firm Bandini, Lampert, and Locke and fled the country? The answer is in The Exchange, the riveting sequel to The Firm. 15 years have passed. See what happens. All right. We'll probably have to buy more copies of The Firm because people will want to refresh the memory. Next is The Secret by Lee and Andrew Childs. Now, most of you know that Andrew Childs will be taking over this franchise, but if you notice, Lee Child's name is huge and Andrew Child's name is tiny, so not yet. This is coming out October 24th. It's 1992. 8 respectable, upstanding people have been found dead across the United States. These deaths look like accidents and don't appear to be connected until one body, the victim of a fatal fall from a hospital window, generates some unexpected attention. That attention comes from the Director of Defense, who promptly calls for an interagency task force to investigate. Jack Reacher is assigned as the Army's representative. So this is one of the ones that go back in time when he's still in the Army. Okay. Bloodlines by Nelson and Alex DeMille, coming out October 10th. Alex DeMille is Nelson's son. Bloodlines features the return of Special Agents Brody and Taylor, who are on the hunt for the cold-blooded murderer of one of their fellow agents. This is a follow-up to The Deserter, which came out in 2019. Next, The Watchmaker's Hand by Jeffrey Deaver, coming out November 28th. When a New York City construction crane mysteriously collapses, causing mass destruction and killing several people, Rhyme and Amelia Sachs are on the case. A political group claims to be behind the sabotage and threatens another crane collapse in 24 hours unless their demands are met. Clock is ticking. Okay, now we have The Edge by David Baldacci, street date November 14th. The 620 Man is back. That was the name of his previous book, The 620 Man, a few books back. And now he's back. He's dropped by his handlers into a small coastal town in Maine to solve the murder of a CIA agent who knew America's dirtiest secrets. Can Travis Devine uncover the truth before his time runs out? Manner of Death by Robin Cook. He's still writing. This will come out December 5th. Lori Montgomery, New York City Chief Medical Examiner, insists that an underperforming pathology resident named Ryan Sullivan assists her on a suicide autopsy. But Lori unknowingly provokes an emotional storm in the trainee. So when Ryan himself appears on the medical examiner's table days later, an apparent death by suicide, Lori's guilt compels her to try to understand why. I can see that. Okay, next up we have mysteries. And you'll see here I've got 4, and they're all not a surprise. They're all series mysteries. These are very popular authors. Just wanted to know that they're coming. Resurrection Walk by Michael Connolly. It's another Lincoln lawyer book. Mickey Haller agreed to represent a woman in prison for killing her husband. Despite her conviction 4 years earlier, she maintains her innocence, and Haller enlists his half-brother, retired LAPD Detective Harry Boss, as an investigator. Okay. Next, Unnatural Death by Patricia Cornwell, street date November 28th. Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Kay Scarpetta finds herself in a Northern Virginia wilderness examining the remains of two campers wanted by federal law enforcement. The victims have been savaged beyond recognition, and other evidence is terrifying and baffling, including a larger-than-life footprint. After one of the most frightening body retrievals of her career, Scarpetta must discover who would commit murders this savage and why. On a lighter note, Dirty 30 by Janet Ivanovich, coming out October 31st. Stephanie Plum, Trenton's hardest working bounty hunter, is offered a freelance assignment that seems simple enough. Local jeweler Martin Rabner wants her to locate his former security guard, Andy Manley, aka Nutsy, he is convinced stole a fortune in diamonds from his safe. She's also looking for another troubled man, Duncan Dugan, a fugitive from justice, arrested for robbing the same jewelry store on the same day. And in the backdrop, of course, is her crazy family and friends, and so there's a lot of mayhem in this book. Finally, for mysteries, we have Betrayal by Philip Margolin, street date November 7th. This is a Robin Lockwood mystery. She finds herself defending her old nemesis in a multiple murder case with too many suspects, where success might cost her own life. In a case where the stakes are high and the truth is elusive, where each new fact twists the case in a new direction, there is seemingly no way to win or direction to turn that will leave Robin Lockwood unscathed. Now, that's the end of fiction. This is just a small sample. There's tons more coming out, but I just hit the high spots here. The next, we're going to do nonfiction. Now, normally this would have been Brian's part, but because he wasn't here, I filled in for him. And since I don't order nonfiction, I sort of took it upon myself to order books that sounded interesting to me. All right, so first we're doing American history. And I've got some really interesting sounding ones here. The first one up is, everyone around here knows who Benedict Arnold is. Everyone knows Benedict Arnold. God Save Benedict Arnold, the true story of America's most hated man by Jack Kelly. This is coming out December 5th. A gripping exploration of the intense psychology and character of Benedict Arnold, arguing that he was essential to victory before he was a traitor. Arnold was a superb leader, a brilliant tactician, a supremely courageous military officer. He was also imperfect, disloyal, villainous. So he's one of the most paradoxical characters in American history and one of the most interesting. Now, this next one is Astor, The Rise and Fall of an American Fortune by Anderson Cooper, coming in on September 19th. Now, you probably are aware that Anderson Cooper is a Vanderbilt. His mother was Gloria Vanderbilt, and he did write a book about the Vanderbilts. And now he decided to take on his family's rivals, the Astors. This family dynasty began when German immigrant John Jacob Astor arrived in the United States in 1783 and built an extraordinary business empire on the basis of beaver trapping. As they show, the name Astor, he wrote it with a co-author, which I didn't put her name in. So it says, as they show, the name Astor glittering through the golden age, but began to fade, burning out with Anthony Marshall's conviction for defrauding his aged mother, Brooke Astor, in 2009. So it's a very sad end to an illustrious family. Next, Killing the Witches, The Horror of Salem, Massachusetts by Bill O'Reilly, coming out September 26th. Bill O'Reilly is very well known for his nonfiction books. I've never read one. I don't know what kind of historian he is, but he did write it with someone else. Killing the Witches revisits one of the most frightening and inexplicable episodes in American history, the events of 1692 and 1693 in Salem Village, Massachusetts. What began as a mysterious affliction of two young girls who suffered violent fits and exhibited strange behavior soon spread to other young women. Rumors of demonic possession and witchcraft consumed Salem. Soon 3 women were arrested under suspicion of being witches, but as the hysteria spread, more than 200 people were accused. 30 were found guilty, 20 were executed, and others died in jail or their lives were ruined. Okay. Longstreet, the Confederate general who defied the South, by Elizabeth Barron, coming out November 21st. During the Civil War, General James Longstreet fought tenaciously for the Confederacy. He was alongside Lee at Gettysburg and counseled him not to order the ill-fated attacks on entrenched Union forces there. He won a major Confederate victory at Chickamauga and was seriously wounded during a later battle. After the war, Longstreet moved to New Orleans, where he dramatically changed course. He supported black voting and joined the newly elected integrated post-war government in Louisiana. When white supremacists took up arms to oust that government, Longstreet, leading the interracial state militia, did battle against former Confederates. And I believe that in the South, he is not well thought of. So this sounds like a very interesting buffalo. It's really what made him change like that. Finally, we have Flight of the Wasp, The Rise, Fall, and Future of America's Original Ruling Class by Michael Gross. This is coming out November 14th. From colonial America's founding settlements through the Gilded Age to the present day, Gross traces the complex legacy of American wasps, their profound accomplishments and egregious failures through the lives of 15 influential individuals and their very privileged, sometimes intermarried families. Okay. Now we're going to look at some fascinating lives. Okay, next up is the Masters, Conversations with Dylan, Lennon, Jagger, Townshend, Garcia, Bono, and Springsteen by Jan Wenner. Street date September 26th. A founder of Rolling Stone magazine collects interviews with some of the most notable people in music history. All right. Next up, we have Madonna, A Rebel Life by Mary Gabriel, coming out October 24th. Deftly tracing Madonna's story from her Michigan roots to her rise to superstardom, master biographer Mary Gabriel captures the dramatic life and achievements of one of the most popular artists of our time. And we have Lou Reed, The King of New York by Will Hermes, coming out October 3rd. There have been many biographies of Lou Reed, but Will Hermes has written a definitive life. He has probed into every corner, talked to people the others overlooked, dug up every last clipping and tape, but above all, he brought to the assignment a sharp eye, clear head, a lucid prose style, and a determination to let Lou be Lou without judgment. And you probably recognize the haunting face of Elon Musk. This is Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson, who is a very well-known and respected biographer. This is coming out on September 12th. For 2 years, Isaacson shadowed Musk, attended his meetings, walked his factories with him, and spent hours interviewing him, his family, friends, coworkers, and adversaries. The result is the revealing inside story filled with amazing tales of triumph and turmoil that addresses the question, are the demons that drive Musk also what it takes to drive innovation and progress? Okay, now we're going to look at memoirs. And just to be clear, memoirs, I've included books that are written by the person they're about. These other ones were not written by the subject. Okay, so here we go. First up, My Name is Barbara by Barbara Streisand, coming out November 7th. At 1,024 pages, Streisand's My Name is Barbara is a memoir as big as its author. No entertainer's memoir has been more anticipated than Barbara Streisand, and this engrossing and delightful book will be eagerly welcomed by her millions of fans. Next, we have My Greenwich Village, Dave, Bob, and Me by Terry Saul, which is coming out October 12th. And as a special treat, we have the author with us today. Terry is a very longtime patron of the New City Library and used to serve on our board of trustees. So since Terry is here with us, I'd like her to unmute herself and tell us a little bit about the book. All right, let me unmute you. Can I unmute her?
Got it.
Oh, she's good. Okay, go ahead, Terry.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I do want to do a shout out for the Claire Keegan book. Brian turned me on to her a while ago, and I am just totally knocked out. I have wallowed really, and they're short. You know, they're an evening, and I have wallowed in anything of hers that I've read. So mine is a little different from a lot of memoirs in that I wasn't raped, I wasn't beaten, I wasn't mistreated. I am not coming out of trauma. Um, it wasn't that bad. Uh, it was a normally not too happy childhood in Brooklyn. Um, what did make it different was that I walked out of it and incidentally never lost touch with my family. But I walked into the world of Greenwich Village in the late 50s. I tumbled into the world of left-wing politics. I joined what was then a social democratic and then a Trotskyist organization. We opposed the Soviet Union. We opposed Stalinism totally. Uh, and I became involved in folk music and wound up married to a folk singer. When we separated, we stayed very good friends for the rest of our lives. And I managed him and a whole bunch of other people. So that is the story, basically, that if you read it, you will read in this book. Um, uh, I talk about getting involved in socialist politics, why, and what I found difficult about it, and why I left. And most of the book really wound up being about the folk music world, which was an interesting one, musically exciting one. No, I don't think folk music is the highest musical art form there is. Uh, Nowadays, I probably listen to more classical and jazz, but I was immersed in it. I loved it, and there are still parts of it, particularly acoustic blues, that I love. There were wonderful people in it. There were exciting musicians. There were exciting times, and it was a very interesting and supportive time. I don't know if anybody here saw the movie Inside Llewyn Davis,
I did.
which was presumably focused on the guy who I was married to for. We were together. We weren't married We were married for 7. We were together for 11 years. Who was Dave Van Ronk, and the movie turned him into a schmuck, and it turned everybody in the coffee house scene into nasty, self-seeking, career-driven people. That's just not what it was. It was friendly. It was fun. People loved each other. They really supported each other. I ultimately left it because I managed people all through the 60s, including Bob Dylan. I did not want that picture on the cover of my book. I didn't want to seem that tied into the Dylan mystique because he is not what my life was all about. But the publisher and I had a fight and I lost. So there's a long chapter about managing Bob, which I did do. Um, uh, there's a fair amount about him. There is a chapter about what it's like to manage people, how they make money. There wasn't an awful lot. There really wasn't. Um, I have gotten good. I've gotten good comments from people in the folk music world who are in that folk music world who have read it, which is the most I can say at this point.
Yeah.
That's
Well, we're looking forward to its publication, and you can certainly get a copy at New City Library, or you could purchase a copy if you'd like. And we're very proud of Terry and excited for her book. So, Terry, thanks for chiming in and giving us your perspective.
Thank you for letting me.
Oh, delightful. Okay, we'll go back to more memoirs. Nothing as exciting. I guess the next one is Data Baby, My Life in a Psychological Experiment by Susanna Breslin, coming out November 7th. When Susanna Breslin is a toddler, her parents enroll her in an exclusive laboratory preschool at the University of California, Berkeley, where she becomes one of over 100 children who are research subjects in an unprecedented 30-year study of personality development that predicts who she and her cohort will grow up to be. Decades later, she starts to wonder how growing up under a microscope shaped her destiny and life choices. And on a very much lighter note, everybody loves Dolly Parton. Even I do, and I don't like her music particularly. But Behind the Scenes, My Life in Rhinestones by Dolly Parton, coming out October 17th. In Behind the Scenes, My Life in Rhinestones, global superstar Dolly Parton shares for the first time the full story behind her lifelong passion for fashion, including how she developed her own distinctly Dolly style, which has defied convention and endeared her to fans around the world. And there's a lot of inside stuff. So if you're a fan, you probably really enjoy this book. Okay, next we're doing miscellaneous nonfiction. Okay. Okay, now nonfiction would not be complete without one true crime, and that's the first one on here. Down the Hill, My Descent into the Double Murder in Delphi by Susan Hendricks, coming out September 19th. A former CNN HLN anchor delves into the double murder of two teens in Indiana who never returned from a popular hiking trail, leaving little behind except for the phone recording of a strange encounter. Ours was The Shining Future, The Rise and Fall of the American Dream by David Leonhardt, coming out October 24th. And this is a very sobering book. 2 decades into the 21st century, the stagnation of living standards has become the defining trend of American life. Life expectancy has declined, economic inequality has soared, and after some progress, the black-white wage gap is once again as large as it was in the 1950s. How did this happen in the world's most powerful country? And what happened to the American dream, the promise of a happier, healthier, more prosperous future, which was once such an inexplicable part of our national identity? Very melancholy for me, personally. Two Roads Home, Hitler, Stalin, and the Miraculous Survival of My Family by Daniel Finkelstein, coming out September 19th. Two Roads Home is a page-turning account of the narrow escape, forged passports, ingenuity, bravery, and luck that allowed, I'm on the wrong one. Let me go back. Okay. That allowed Miriam and Ludwig to survive the war and find each other. Using their personal testimony, letters sent to Siberia, a diary written in Belston, and years of historical research, Daniel Finkelstein tells what happened to two families, one the victim of the Nazis, the other of the Soviets. And you'll notice a very well-known book, The French Chef Cookbook, is on here by Julia Child, coming out November 21st. This is a beautiful new edition of the beloved cookbook, capturing the spirit of Julia Child's debut TV show, which made her a star. It is now featured as the centerpiece of HBO Max's Julia. The French Chef Cookbook is a comprehensive collection of more than 300 classic French recipes, and this will make a lovely gift for someone, I think. Okay, Broken Code, Inside Facebook and the Fight to Expose Its Harmful Secrets by Jeff Horowitz. Street date, November 14th. Wall Street Journal reported Jeff Horowitz lays out in sobering detail not just the architecture of Facebook's failures, but what the company knew and often disregarded about its societal impact. In 2021, the company would rebrand itself Meta, promoting a techno-utopian wonderland. But its broken code shows the problems spawned around the globe by social media can't be resolved by strapping on a headset. Okay, continuing with the tech theme, Breaking Twitter, Elon Musk, and the most controversial corporate takeover in history by Ben Mesrich. Street date, November 7th. Could read this along with the biography by Walter Isaacson. Breaking Twitter takes readers inside the darkly comic battle between one of the most intriguing, polarizing, influential men of our time, Elon Musk, and the company that represents our culture's dearest hopes for a fair global conversation. From employee accounts within Twitter's headquarters to the mission-driven team Musk surrounded himself with, this is the full story from all sides. And continuing on that theme, the next, Blood in the Machine, The Origins of the Rebellion Against Big Tech by Brian Merchant, street date September 5th. It's not the one you think. An underground network of 19th century rebels, the Luddites, took up arms against the industrialists, automating their work in this true story of the first time machines came for human jobs, setting the stage for the threat of big tech today. And finally, we have The Core of an Onion, Peeling the Rarest Common Food, featuring more than 100 historical recipes by Mark Kurlansky. This is going to be out on November 7th. And if you're familiar with his other books, one with cod, one with salt, in this one he takes a delectable look at the cultural, historical, and gastronomical layers of one of the world's most beloved culinary staples, featuring original illustrations and recipes from around the world. And if you like to cook, you might want to read Book of an Onion. Okay, now this is our sign off. We're not going to be having a webinar in August because we thought with the move everything would be so topsy-turvy. We will be returning in September, and maybe the time and date to be determined. But I hope that everyone enjoyed the webinar or maybe found one or two books that piqued their interest. I have sent everyone a bibliography of all the titles, so if you check your email, you should see it there. Does anyone have any questions about anything? You could write it in the chat or just unmute yourself and speak up. I guess I have a side group here. Okay. As I said, this is just a small sample. If you really want to know what's coming out, you can look at sites like Literary Hub. You could just Google it. You can get a subscription to Literary Hub, and it has a lot of very interesting articles. And they did have an article this week about the most anticipated books for the second half of the year. So I was going to send you all a link, but it just didn't work out that way. So, but also Fantastic Fiction is a good site. And looking at our own catalog, we put 3 months out of books that are coming out. So that's another way to find out about what's coming out. So I thank you all for coming. If there's no other questions, I'll let you go on with the rest of your lives and enjoy the summer. Keep reading.